This June, Wonderwoman, the fourth installment in the DC Extended Universe, arrives in theaters. There's a lot riding on it, not just because it's the first female-led superhero movie of the modern era, but because so far, the cinematic universe based on the DC Comics superheroes has been met with, let's say, mixed reactions. Yes, the movies have been profitable, but they've been critical disasters that have sharply divided audiences. Since Warner Brothers intends for this franchise to continue for at least the next decade, with multiple new installments every year, it would be helpful to finally have one that's widely embraced. There's been a lot of talk over the past year about what the problem is with these movies. Many people point to an overly dark and bleak tone, which I'll agree is an issue. But I think there's a much larger problem that runs through all three movies, and it's one I think the people making them desperately need to fix if they want this series to succeed in the long run. It's the characters. Yeah, those guys. So far in the DCEU, there are no well-defined dynamic characters. By that, I mean characters with clear motivations, growth, and personalities. We haven't been given a good reason to care about any of them. These movies have been coasting on great marketing and the built-in popularity of the brands. People are going to go see a Batman movie, that's just how it works. But if the universe is going to succeed, if Warner Brothers wants audiences to get invested in it, they need to present us with characters worth caring about. They seem to be assuming we're going to show up because we already know and like the characters, but here's the catch. We like previous versions of Superman and Batman, from the comics or other movies or cartoons. For this series to work, we need to like this Superman and this Batman. And, so far, a lot of us don't. See, the whole idea of a cinematic universe rests on a core concept: that audiences like the characters and want to see them interact with each other in different movies. Why did the Marvel Cinematic Universe become such a massive, astounding success? Because people love those characters. Why do they love those characters? Because Marvel did the hard work of developing interesting, fully formed characters that audiences cared about. To give you a piece of anecdotal evidence, last August I went to see Suicide Squad on its opening weekend. There were a couple scenes that have little cameos by Batman and the Flash. When these cameos happened, in this sold-out Times Square theater, the biggest audience reaction I detected were some whispers of, "I think it's the Flash," and "Is that Ben Affleck?" In comparison, a few years earlier, I remember seeing Thor: The Dark World, which is no one's favorite Marvel movie. But there's a scene where Captain America shows up for about 10 seconds, and immediately the entire audience erupted in cheers. That's the reaction Warner Brothers wants, but they haven't earned it yet. See, stories are driven by characters, and our investment in stories comes from our empathy for the characters. Empathy is gained by showing us what characters want, what motivates them, choices they make, and how they change. Let's look at a really effective example. Tony Stark in 2008's Iron Man. At the beginning, Tony is an arrogant douche driven mostly by selfish desires. He's then attacked by terrorists, captured, and almost killed by his own weapons. He escapes and makes two big decisions: to stop producing weapons and to start using his technology to help people to make up for the damage that his work caused. He started the movie driven by greed, and through learning new information and making choices, he grew into a person driven by a desire to help people. A not-so-great person becomes a good person. This is classic, effective storytelling, and it worked so well that it took a B-list superhero and launched one of the most successful movie franchises of all time. So now, let's see how Superman's own origin is handled in Man of Steel. Can you tell me how he changes from the start of this movie to the end? That's a trick question, because he doesn't. This is the first time we see Superman in the movie, heroically saving people at a burning oil rig. Now skip ahead 2 hours. Here he is in the climactic scene, heroically saving people from General Zod. If this is an origin story and he's already a hero at the start, what's the point? How is he growing? Well, he's not, that's the problem. Unless shaving his beard and putting on a cape counts as a character arc. He even stays a jerk in the same way. At the start, he destroys a guy's truck because the guy was rude, and then at the end, he destroys the military's drone because they annoyed him. And here's a larger issue. Why is he helping people in the first place? If he's going to dedicate his life to helping people, what motivates him to do that? I don't actually think there's an answer to that question other than he's Superman. Even when we see him as a kid in the flashbacks, he's saving people. The movie never shows him learn why it's important to use his powers for good. In fact, his father keeps telling him not to use his powers and to let people die instead. But then he also tells him that he's going to change the world one day. This is slightly off topic, but I want to point out how confusingly Pa Kent is written in this movie. Getting back to Superman, we don't know what he wants, we don't know what his motivation is, and we never see him grow as a person. Why are we supposed to be interested in this guy? As an experiment, imagine you had never heard of Superman and had no preconceived thoughts or opinions about the character. If this was your introduction to him, would you care enough about him after this movie to want to see a sequel? In Robert McKee's classic screenwriting book, Story, He writes, "True character is revealed in the choices a human being makes under pressure. The greater the pressure, the deeper the revelation. The truer the choice to the character's essential nature." Basically, we learn who a character is through the choices they make. Almost all superhero origin movies give us a moment where the main character makes a huge choice that defines their outlook on life, in which they decide to help people. A great example comes in Batman Begins. At the end of Bruce Wayne's training in the League of Shadows, he is ordered to execute a criminal. He refuses, saying,
"I will go back to Gotham and I will fight men like this, but I will not become an executioner."
Right here, he makes a decision that expresses what he believes and leads directly to him becoming Batman. This is the major turning point of the movie, and it's completely rooted in character. Maybe the most effective origin story is in Sam Raimi's original Spider-Man. You know how the story goes. Uncle Ben tells Peter that,
"With great power comes great responsibility."
Peter uses his powers for personal gain, then chooses not to stop a criminal, then that same criminal goes and murders Uncle Ben. The most important moment is when Peter catches the criminal and recognizes him, realizing that if he hadn't behaved selfishly, his uncle would still be alive. He remembers the advice his uncle gave him and now makes the decision to follow that advice and never let anything like this happen again.
With great power comes great responsibility. Remember that, Pete. Remember that.
Man of Steel never gives Superman a moment like this. He never makes a choice that defines who he is to the audience, and it doesn't get any better in the next movie. For the majority of this 2.5-hour film, Superman is focused on two things: helping people, despite the fact that he appears to really not enjoy it, and Batman, whose methods he doesn't approve of. He seems far more concerned with the Bat Vigilante than all the actual criminals committing actual crimes, to the extent that at one point he stops Batman from catching some of those criminals just so he can threaten him and then fly away. Once again, there's no arc for Superman. He ends the movie by sacrificing his life in order to kill a giant monster, which seems like the completion of an arc that's never set up. And considering that a guy is straight up getting killed saving the world, we should care more than we do. Batman, on the other hand, does have an arc. Unfortunately, it's a pretty stupid one. He starts the movie hating Superman and wanting to kill him, and then finally he realizes that they're on the same side. The problem is that this is after 2 hours of Batman learning nothing while everyone tells him that killing Superman is a terrible idea.
But he is not our enemy.
And we, as the audience, know that Superman isn't a bad guy, so we're rooting against Batman. His big moment of growth is to realize, hey, that guy who saved the planet isn't so bad. I also want to point out that considering Batman thinks Superman is a massive danger that has to be destroyed, it takes him 1.5 years to actually act on that. Isn't he supposed to be good at what he does? His distrust in Superman is actually pretty well set up in the opening scene, but the jump to wanting to kill him is way too extreme for us to empathize with. So for this whole movie, Batman is relentlessly, unwaveringly angry, and Superman is just there, not growing or learning or making choices. Part of what makes this movie feel so long is that the characters are so static for so much of it. For both Superman and Batman, their emotional states never change through almost the entire film. They remain the same from scene to scene, locked in the same exact way of thinking. You could easily move their big showdown up 90 minutes earlier in the movie, since in all that time, the characters' perspectives remain exactly the same. Sure, that would mean the audience would miss finding out where Batman got the kryptonite, or his big CrossFit montage, but I think they'd still get the idea. Okay, I should probably talk about Suicide Squad now. While it's the worst of the DC films, it also offers up the closest they've come to interesting characters. There are a ton of characters in this movie, but the primary protagonists, our heroes if you will, are Deadshot and Harley Quinn. Unlike Superman or Batman, they actually have personalities. They have personality, but still no growth. They're following orders, and other than not wanting to die, have no personal investment in what they're doing. Deadshot seems to have an arc that's intended by the filmmakers, but it makes no sense. He's a hitman who's in prison and wants to take care of his daughter. She doesn't like what he does for a living and wants him to change. But then at the climax, as he's about to shoot a bomb that will destroy the villain and save the world, he imagines his daughter in front of him, telling him not to pull the trigger. But he's not killing a person for money, he's literally saving the world. Why wouldn't his daughter want him to do that? It's a lazy attempt at forcing in a character arc, like the filmmakers forgot to include one and then just plugged it in at the end. Harley, while probably the most fun person to watch in the movie, is completely static. She wants to get back together with the Joker for the entire movie. That's it. In the final scene, they get back together. What's a shame is that there's a great arc sitting there unused, where she could realize over the course of the movie how abusive and awful he is, and then finally gain some independence and reject him, but sadly that does not happen. The one character with any emotional connection to the main story is Rick Flagg, whose girlfriend, June Moon, gets possessed by the Enchantress and becomes the main villain of the movie. So while the team is on a mission to kill her, he wants to find a way to save her. But because Deadshot is cooler and played by Will Smith, Flagg gets relegated to a supporting role. He should really be the one to make the final shot to destroy Enchantress, but that goes to Deadshot, a guy with zero connection to her. So in the end, Suicide Squad gives us a bunch of characters with personalities who seem like they could be interesting, but the script gives us nothing to form any emotional connection to. Even when it's occasionally amusing, we still don't really care because there's nothing happening remotely below the surface. While I criticize DC films a lot, I'll be the first to admit they're doing some things right. Unlike Marvel, they've managed to create memorable musical themes for two of their major characters. The choice to shoot their movies on film gives the visuals a richness and texture that Marvel's digitally shot movies can't come close to. And the casting, with one or two exceptions, has been consistently great, which isn't easy when dealing with characters this iconic. It's clear that the filmmakers behind these movies, in particular Zack Snyder and David Goyer, had ambitious goals. Man of Steel aimed to be a realistic look at how a godlike alien might exist in the real world. Batman v Superman wanted to explore the ideas of power and fear through a mix of superhero action movie and political thriller. And Suicide Squad, well, I don't know exactly what that was aiming for, since it feels like three very different visions arguing with each other. We can debate the extent to which they succeeded all day long, but that doesn't change the fact that the character work has been seriously neglected in all three movies. In all their grand ambitions, the filmmakers have forgotten that if we're going to care about the stories, we need to empathize with the characters. So while I'm glad that they seem to be easing off on the relentlessly grim tone, what I'm really hoping for from Wonderwoman is a central character I can get invested in. I want to know what motivates Diana to leave Themyscira to help the rest of mankind. I want to see her learn and grow and change over the course of the movie. If that happens, then maybe, just maybe, there might be some hope for this cinematic universe after all. Hey guys, thank you for watching. Now, I wanted to make this video because a couple months ago, I made that video essay discussing the color grading in Marvel's movies, and I felt it was only fair to balance the scales and discuss my biggest issue with DC's movies. But this is probably going to be the last video essay I make about comic book movies for the foreseeable future. Now, I realize with this subject matter, the comment section might get a little heated, which is fine. If you disagree with me, I'm envious of you because I wish I liked these movies. But I ask one thing, and that's you don't accuse me of not knowing the comics, because as anyone who's watched my other videos can tell you, that's objectively untrue. Anyway, if you want to help us make these videos and contribute to the budgets for them, check out the link to our Patreon. If you want to yell at me about literally anything and get updates on what we're working on, check out the social media links. We'll be back here next week with a very big, very cool new video. And for now, I'm gonna go do anything other than think about these movies because I'm really sick of it.